Hey y'all, Jabo here, bringing you today's latest Hearthstone patch notes for Standard. Now, if you've been playing a lot of competitive rank, you already know that these are some much needed balances. But the question is, are they enough? Well, for all you Unholy Rune Death Knights and Hardcore Warrior fans, I sure hope so. Now to start off, we have some buffs for the Death Knight cards, specifically the Void-based kind, so we've reduced the cost of Unholy Frenzy to just 2, and that's the one that, as you can see, where you choose an enemy minion, your minions would attack it, resummoning any that die. And this is actually quite a powerful card, even at 3, because any minion that attacked with Reborn would come back with Reborn, so it led to some sticky boards and being a good responsive card. Now that it's 2 cost, I imagine it'll be able to keep up with the harder aggro decks and kind of help build the win con needed to win with Unholy Death Knight. In similar settings, you know, the Necromancer giving their corpses 1 more health from 1-2 to 1-3, as well as Bone Guard also spawning 1-3 footmen, will make them immune to some weaker crowd controls that could just handle them very easily, such as Frost Death Knights, Holy Nova, even from Priest, not that anybody runs that, or any of the like, such that they're a bit harder to just control and win back the board immediately. So look out for some more Death Knights coming out and some more board-based decks, hopefully. Not as many OTK decks. Next, we have some nerfs. Now, these hit some of the hardest winning decks right in the core. Frost Death Knight, obviously very famous for its OTK from hand spell damage with things like Glacial Advance. The fact that this used to make spells cost 2 less after you cast it. So, to reiterate, when you cast it, your next spell would cost 2 less as opposed to 1. Could lead to some insane damage in just 1 turn. So, I think that this was a helpful nerf. I do think that Glacial Advance is way too strong of a card. I mean, 4 damage for 3, really a 1 cost spell if you were to chain it with any other spell, so it's really 1 damage for 4. It's like a Soulfire with the benefit, almost. So, much needed nerf, especially with the other high damage spells that could all go face for Frost Death Knight. Now, these other 2 are actually a product of an interesting brand of Demon Hunter that was going around for a while. I think it was the minionless one, where they just did hard aggro board control with the things with Rush and Sinful Brand to kind of chip down the opponent, and then they finish them with massive spell damage or fell spells. And for that reason, I do think the Sinful Brand nerf was pretty good. Making it a 2 cost spell makes it much less efficient, and also just a bit more in balance with the rest of the spells that Demon Hunter has. Now, the one nerf that I'm not really sure is going to do much is Final Showdown. So, you draw 6 cards in 1 turn, you reduce the cost of the cards drawn by 1. So, yeah, sure, it's a pretty heavy nerf on the first stage of the quest, but the reality is that the point of this quest, from what I've seen, is just to get discounts, and this lets you get discounts on more cards. So, ironically enough, I think the only problem you could possibly run into while running this is just hand size, so maybe that's going to be what is the limiting factor, and also the fact that the final reward is just a 5 mana 7/7 who discounts the rest of your deck. But at the end of the day, by the time you get done with this quest, you've drawn most of your deck anyway. So it was never even about him being the reward. So I'm not sure if this is going to do a whole lot or not. I do think it'll do something. I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm just curious to see as if it actually has a crazy effect. Because typically, with all the card draw there is available, the opponents I've faced never had much issue. But I do suppose that going from draw 4 to draw 6 is a pretty big leap. So I have my hopes up for this. Now here, they're treating this like a buff, but it's really not. Over here on the right, we got Shock Splitter. It nerfed again, by the way, so this has been nerfed twice. Imagine, this used to cost, I think, 2, right? It went up to 3 and now is 4. So this was honestly an insane combo of a card, especially with all the utility that they had released with it. Discovering copies of Shock Splitter, getting copies in hand, having all these weapon choices, and having all these supplements for it made Shock Splitter Hunter like a very solid deck, and also just almost uncounterable. There wasn't really a lot of good ways to take the combo out of hand because of how many copies they could generate, and also just all the other high utility board states like the beast cards and all the wild seeds still being pretty good. But I digress. Some other maybe more niche buffs this time. Wither was nerfed down to 1 cost, so I'd like to see if that makes aggro undead druid any more viable as opposed to the current aggro druid that's just insanely popular and I'm not honestly super huge of a fan of, but neither here nor there. And then they have I think they reduced this down to 7, or from 7 to 6, so maybe this will be a much more tempo-based card. I haven't played a lot of Outcast Demon Hunter, so I don't have a lot to say about this, but I do think that obviously reducing the cost by 1 and it already having cost reduction is going to be huge for that specific deck. Now here, they've done some nice things to Miracle Mage. They've made all of it happen a turn faster with Vast Wisdom and an Energy Shaper. I just made a Miracle Mage video, so I'm not super interested in necessarily trying out these, but I am going to certainly go back to my old deck and see how it feels. This happening all turn sooner could be really huge, but at the end of the day, you're kind of left to the fate of Energy Shaper anyway, so I guess we'll see. And then some additional love for Dragon Paladin, probably because we don't really see any of it, right? So Time Warden, being a whole mana cheaper, lets you both A, set up for a big turn 4, or B, set up for a big later turn with only having to dedicate 3 mana to giving the rest of your dragons Divine Shield. So I'm hoping that this makes dragons see more play, because I am pretty biased. I love dragons. I love the dragon synergies. I love the value they have. So hopefully Dragon Paladin gets a little bit more limelight, and hopefully they just nerf Cariel to the ground. Haha. Some love for Undead Priest, so maybe could be worth the time to go back and mess with our old Undead Priest deck to see what we could do. Balsa, costing only 4 now, could make the aggro side happen much sooner. And Haunting Nightmare now actually feels like a problem. You know, being a 3/3 was already pretty strong, but now it's a 4/3. Going to be something to absolutely reckon with and just be wary of. So I think aggro Undead Priest is going to be something that I'm pretty scared of in the coming future. I guess only time will tell, though. Now, finally, a much-needed nerf. The Wild Paw Knoll. This card here. Granted, it's one of the only cards that heavily rewarded you for running the Disguised Legendary. I forget their name. But point being is that being a rogue and running that card just to disguise yourself as another hero would give you access to another hero power, which was nice. But with Knoll having that interaction where because you were like a warrior or something and you were drawing road cards, it would just make Knoll free just for taking your turn. Like, it was the easiest discount ever. There was never a version of rogue you didn't run Knoll in if you were running some sort of miracle set. Or not miracle, but discover set from another class. So yeah, I'm glad to see this. This will probably balance this out. Hopefully kill this card for a little bit. I think we've just seen a little too much of it. Similarly with Sinstone Graveyard, I mean, we've nerfed this I think a couple times now, but these things having stealth previously, that was insane. Like the fact that you could just pull a 20/20 ghost and potentially 2 of them on your board and there's nothing your opponent could potentially do about it unless they're a freeze mage or something, just led to like what were we looking for in a win condition? Just the fact that you had good APM. So yeah. Now, a buff I'm just completely in love with and biased over is the fact that we reduced Drathier down 1 whole mana. Now, if you've seen my video with Warlock and Darkon, you know that it doesn't actually matter, really, because we never actually played Drathier. Our interest was discarding and summoning with Shallow Grave. But this being 7 mana does open up the combo a little bit more and allows you just to play the card independent of that one combo, because that one combo is, I think, the only way you'd ever see this card in play. I don't think many of you have seen it. I've only seen it in the deck I made, so I've never seen that card other than that. So maybe it'll get some more love, especially with the added support to Infantry Reanimator. The fact that this is also 1 mana cheaper now is huge and will hopefully kind of help supplement and make that Undead Warlock feel much better. Now, we've been nerfed, we've been buffed. Here we are, Nelly, once again, going back to kind of a more powerful state previously after being nerfed. So I never really ran Pirate Warrior that often, and I also never ran Nelly as a Colossal, so I don't have a lot to say. But if it brings back Pirate Quest Warrior, it'd be nice just to see Warrior back in the meta again in some major way, which is probably what the Hearthstone devs think as well, because we have some buffs to Ramornia going up 1 attack now, so having a lot more impact for 7 mana, which is nice. Being a card that could re-ran independent of Enrage now, arguably so, because really you didn't run this card too often because Imbued Axe was this much better. So maybe this will make it a bit more viable of an option. Maybe not. Now here is going to be my favorite part. We've got some buffs to Warrior in general. Asmodon now has Taunt, which still don't have a lot of niche situations you could play him in, and Disruptive Spellbreaker is a bit harder to kill now. So a bit of love for the control side of Warrior. But more importantly here, Last Stand. This card was absolute dog water. A 4 mana draw 1 just to double stats was just terrible. But now that we're down to 1 mana, and yes, I see it does have Mana Thirst, you have to wait till 7 to get the double stats effect. But the reality is this sets up for a much more conducive combo turn, or even just hand buff Warrior that I'm going to be experimenting probably with first. What'll be one of the first decks I try to make work, and look out for that in the future video. And finally, main character of the evening, the nerf we all saw coming, Astalor, the most powerful card ever made. I mean, an absurd amount of play rate, upwards of 60% in every deck you'd see, and you'd find it in Secret Mage, you'd find it in Beast Hunter, you'd find it in Curse Warlock, just because it just fits so well in with the curve. And the dangerous thing with Mana Thirst and Astalor is that he just flowed so smoothly. Well, at least in those niche situations, maybe not much longer. So to be specific, they did move the Mana Thirst all up a turn, and they also nerfed the Final Form's damage. So you can't see it here, but it takes you one longer turn to get the 2 damage in. It takes you one longer turn to get the armor from second form, and now he only does a max of 14 damage for his initial battle cry. So I think for his participation and usage in a bunch of decks, this is a step in the right direction as well. I don't see this affecting Combo Druid at all. I think Combo Druid can still get the job done with several iterations of 14 damage. Now, granted, it is much less over time as you do that multiplication, but the reality is if you play 2, that's still 28 times 2, right? We're still looking at 56 damage. So ultimately, still a lot of damage for one combo turn. So I guess we'll see. I don't think any Combo Druid lovers are too hurt by this nerf, especially because Druid just gains mana so efficiently. So the 1 mana increase doesn't do much to Combo Druid at all. But maybe their intention was not to hit that at all, and hopefully we'll see a little less of Astalor, because I'm about sick of this card, honestly. That being said, I've ran him myself, so how much can I really say? But that's really all for the buffs and nerfs for Standard. I'm super excited that we're getting some fresh content, kind of, in the sense that there's going to be a slight change in the meta. And look out for some of my new decks coming that these buffs kind of support. So looking for some Warrior Love, maybe going to revisit the Warlock idea and temper with that deck a bit to make Drithir a bit more lovely and a bit more deadly. And until then, thanks you guys for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe for future ones, and I hope to see you soon for some more March of the Lich King Hearthstone fun decks. Until then, ciao!